Alex O'Connor, thanks very much for coming on to Talk Beliefs. You run a very successful YouTube channel called Cosmic Skeptic, which you've been doing for a few years now, where you've gone from strength to strength, well over 200,000 subscribers. In fact, it was at the London special screening of Apostasy, a film about Jehovah's Witnesses, that I remarked on how you had, I think it was like 199,998 subscribers at the time or thereabouts. And then you took out your phone, refreshed it, and as we watched, it flipped over to 200,000. That was really thrilling.
Yeah, that's right. It was a good little moment. I'm happy to have been able to share it with somebody at such a fun event as well. It was a good opportunity.
Excellent. Yeah, it was amazing. Just the other day, I flipped over to 8,000, yesterday actually. So it doesn't really compare to your 200K, but I'm very pleased with that.
Oh, well, congratulations. I'm glad to see that things are going well for you.
Thank you very much, Alex. So I think to start off, let's hear a little bit about you, where you've grown up, what kind of childhood you had, if you had a religious upbringing or a non-religious upbringing, and how that kind of colored your outlook on things.
My earliest memories are of being a Roman Catholic. It wasn't particularly steadfast. I've always said that I was quite lucky in that it was somewhat of a casual faith, although in terms of my level of belief, it was certainly fairly devout. I remember, I can recount sitting doing a rosary bead on school trips while everybody else was doing whatever it is that young kids are supposed to do on the bus journeys to retreats. But there I was doing my rosary, and I'd go to Mass. I was an altar boy at one point, serving the altar in the robes and swinging the incense and all of that malarkey. So I really did believe in what was being said. It was a slow, gradual transition to letting that go. And I sort of, when I did let it go, I kind of moved immediately to disbelief in any kind of God. Maybe that was a foolish move. You know, you shouldn't discount all of religion just for the sake of being disillusioned with one of them. But having had the opportunity now to look at a bunch of different religious traditions from an outsider's perspective, I still remain unconvinced. But in the early days, it was very much Roman Catholicism. I went to Catholic schools in our country, the UK. Unlike the US, we have state-funded faith schools. I think it's 1 in 3, maybe 2 in 3. In fact, I'd have to double check that. But whichever it is, it's too high. Of publicly funded schools in the UK are faith schools, and I went to them for both primary and secondary education, which meant that it was kind of an institutionalized faith that I was being fed through my schooling. But I still managed to find a way to brush that off. But it wasn't made particularly easy by the fact that we were kind of surrounded by this air of Catholicism all the time.
So round about the age 17, you wanted to talk about your atheism and your thoughts on religion and religious beliefs on a YouTube channel. So how did the Cosmic Skeptic channel come about?
So it kind of came about by accident almost. I'd made videos in the past, nothing commentary based. It was more laid back, entertainment style videos. As a young boy, like, that's all I wanted to do half the time was just make silly videos and upload them to the internet. And at one point, I decided that I could start commentating on things. That there was this surge in popularity on YouTube with commentary channels talking about politics and cultural politics in particular. And it seemed to be an interesting field, and I was really invested in these videos, and I decided to make my own. So I started making videos talking about bits and bobs, and then one video I made was I came across a cartoon by Watchtower. I didn't have a clue what Watchtower was at the time, didn't know anything about Jehovah's Witnesses. As far as I was concerned, it was just another Christian production. But it was of, what is it, Caleb and Sophia, I think their name.
Yes, I remember watching that, the cartoon, yes. I've had a lot of dealings with J-Dub, so.
Yeah, and it's the one where they come and the child says that her friend has two mothers, and she starts getting told by her mother how she should speak to her friend and tell her why, you know, this is wrong, this isn't right, they should really be seeking God. And I responded to it. I did it in such a way that was more for the sake of entertainment than anything else, because like I say, back then that's what I was planning to do. So I'd never dream of making a video like that today, the way that I made it back then. I mean, I was just joking. I was taking the mick. I was swearing all the way through it, and it's completely different to the kind of thing I do now. But that video got some views, and I remember it started sort of slowly creeping up. Then I decided to start making scientific-based videos. So I made some videos about the laws of motion, and I made videos about the science of anxiety and about nominative determinism and all these interesting concepts. A bit like Vsauce, let's say. But as that was going on, this other video, the one full of swearing and joking and religious bashing, was growing and growing and growing, and I really wanted to take it down because I didn't think it represented what I wanted to do. Then one day I woke up and that video had hit 10,000 views.
Wow.
That's a big, big deal. And it had slowly gotten up there, and I think on the exact same day I hit 400 subscribers. And so I went out with a friend to celebrate. Now that day I'd uploaded another video where I responded to a pastor, Greg Locke, who was just saying that the Bible is 100% accurate. And I responded to that, and I really didn't know about uploading it because it didn't fit with the channel, and I nearly didn't. And I sat there with my finger hovering over the upload button, but I decided to just do it and move on, and if it went badly, I could always take it down. So I went out with my friend to celebrate the fact that I'd hit 10,000 views on one of my videos over months and months it had been up at that point. Anyway, that video was shared on Reddit. It got picked up by Hemant Mehta, the second video I mean, the Pastor Greg Locke one, which I didn't know until I woke up the next morning. And that video that I uploaded the day before had 10,000 views overnight. And, I mean, that just blew me away. And then I saw I had something like 1,000 subscribers. And I didn't have a clue what was going on. And it took a long time for me to figure out that it had been shared, that it had been seen, that Hemant had shared it, and all this kind of stuff. And I immediately decided, well, I guess this is what works. This is what I'm going to have to do. And so that's how it started. It was just stumbling across a video that I almost didn't upload, and then deciding, I guess that's what people want to see me talk about.
Wow. So now you've done videos with several known YouTubers in the skeptic community, including Lloyd Evans, Rationality Rules, Rachel Oates, and you were even invited on the very popular Christian radio show, Unbelievable show, which I subscribe to myself, that often has a theist and an atheist in the studio. And you were pitted against Christian apologist Frank Turek, someone I've debunked myself on my own channel. But you were face to face with him. You were sitting right next to him because we could see the video as well. So what was that like for you?
It was interesting. I mean, I knew that I was sat next to a man who'd said that if God told him to murder his children, he'd do it. He said that in front of a college audience, and kind of didn't escape me that's the kind of person I was sat next to. But at the same time, he was a perfectly nice man. I mean, he was very friendly, very eager to shake your hand and ask you about how you're doing. He emails me every now and again. I've had email from him asking me about, what I'm up to, how the education is going, and things like this. And he seems like a perfectly nice man, and he is, I would imagine. It's one of these examples of how a perfectly agreeable human being manages to hold incredibly corrupt views. It's an interesting thing to see in person. But actually debating him was an interesting experience, because here's a man who's had a lot of experience in it. I mean, he does it as a job. He goes to college campuses. He's debated many people. He's debated David Silverman. He debated Christopher Hitchens. And here I was sat across the table from him. And immediately it was bogged down with definitional issues, like trying to determine what we really mean by atheists, what we really mean by God or morality, and these didn't necessarily hold too much relevance to the conversation that we were trying to have. And
a lot of redefining things, I think I remember. Was that right?
Yeah, in a way. It's like I found it very difficult to get past the definition of atheism when we weren't even really talking about that. We were talking about morality, and he was trying to kind of press me on it, and he he was saying, well, if you're going to say that atheism is a lack of belief in God, then this book is an atheist. And I'm thinking, well, this holds no relevance to the conversation. And it's like, if you define a vegan as someone who doesn't eat meat, then this book is also a vegan. It's pointless. It's a fatuous thing to be doing.
Yeah.
Finally kind of got through, and the only part of the debate that I think was really worth sort of going for, the thing that made me feel, yes, it was probably worth my time having this discussion, was at the point when Turek does what he often does, which is accuses somebody of circular reasoning, because they use the reason that they have to justify the fact that, it's that we know that evolution is a fact because of reason that we got through evolution. I mean, evolution gave us our reason, and we're now using our reason to uncover the fact that evolution occurred. And he said this is circular reasoning. And I said, well, hold on. You think that God exists, for instance. Why do you think that God exists? Through reason. And where did you get your reason from? From God. If you're using a reason that you got from God, the reason that God exists, then you're also being circular. Now, I don't think that's circular reasoning. I mean, that's not what circular reasoning is. But if you're going to say that that's what I'm doing, then you're doing it too. And then the conversation kind of moved on. But that moment of clashing made me realize that he's accusing people of making logical fallacies, which aren't actually logical fallacies, but that even if they were, he'd be committing them too. So it was a good opportunity to be able to kind of think of that while I was sat next to him, and the fact that I was able to think of that and say it to him, I'm certainly glad for. But it made it a fun experience overall. I'm glad to have done it.
Yeah, and just recently, you were on Unbelievable again, talking about the contingency argument, and I've been listening to that. I know they took some video of that as well, and that was another interesting one. But I felt that he was kind of like assuming God into the equation, you're sort of shoehorning God in, but that's often the case, isn't it?
It's Cameron Batuzzi. He's a really nice guy. I've spoken to him a few times now. He's a very honest debater, a very honest investigator into philosophical issues. But I do think that he was doing what is actually circular reasoning without realizing it. I mean, it's similar to the Kalam cosmological argument in the way that the conclusion is actually embedded into the first premise.
Yeah, the deck is definitely stacked in a lot of these cases, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. And also, I think I took a line of rebuttal that he didn't expect, so to speak, and I didn't do that as a debate tactic. It's just what I thought. And I have to thank my friend Stephen, Rationality Rules, because I think it was him who first sort of made me see this as a criticism. Contingency argument relies on the fact that there are contingent things in the universe, and that means that they could have not existed. You know, they have an explanation for their existence. Like you and I are contingent because we needed our parents to come together at the exact right time, at the exact right place, in order for us to exist. This cup is contingent. It could have not existed. It could have existed in a different form. And usually people immediately grant that. They say, of course, so there are contingent objects, and the debates around whether or not contingent objects as a whole need an explanation. But I wouldn't even let that get off the ground, because I said, well, how do you know that this is contingent? I mean, if we live in a deterministic universe, then it's not the case that this cup could have not existed. This cup had to exist. And especially if you're going to say there is a necessary being who is the cause of everything, this is God. If God is a necessary being, then everything he does necessarily. And if he does something necessarily, then that means it can't have been any other way. So if this cup existing, or me saying these words are ultimately caused by a necessary being, then all of this is also necessary by extension. So the very first premise, the simplest one, the fact that there are contingent things, which seems blindingly obvious, but I said, no, it's actually not blindingly obvious. And in fact, if you give it a moment's thought, you'll realize that you can't prove that there even is such thing as contingency. And we spent about half an hour talking about this. But I think that's because he didn't expect me to pick up the debate there. And that led to a really interesting discussion. Because he had to defend the argument in a way that is not the usual way of having to defend that argument. Usually you're defending ideas like the necessary being would be God. I mean, that's something that you spend a lot of time defending, but this was something a bit different. So I think it was a quite unique discussion in that respect.
Yes, really, you kind of caught him out on the first premise in the first place, which he thought, I suppose, was you couldn't possibly undermine it. And it is usually a case of like, well, you don't have to explain God. We'll get to God, but that doesn't need explaining. He's outside of time and space and all this usual stuff. Mm. And they think that they've got you snookered.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Alex, I know from experience as a YouTuber who challenges Christianity and other religions, the remarks in the comments section can be pretty harsh sometimes, and I know you've read out your hate mail on your show, but there must be a lot of proselytizing at YouTube, people trying to save your soul, that kind of thing. Does that happen?
Every now and again, not as much as I would have liked, actually. I mean, I quite enjoy getting angry emails or comments that I don't have to do anything about because they are their own downfall. I mean, they just are immediately self-refuting to anybody who gives them a moment's thought. But I don't actually get as much as people think that I do. I think that's because my style of working is not too confrontational. You know, I understand that the people who hold the beliefs that I'm criticizing are no better or worse than I am. They've just fallen victim to what I think is a bad idea, just as I've probably fallen victim to many, many bad ideas. Obviously, I don't know what they are, because if I did, then I wouldn't hold them, but the likelihood is I hold many of them, and I recognize that everybody's capable of that. So I think because I give people that decency, I think people don't tend to get angry. Although when it does happen, it just brushes right off. If you're going to say something that has no substance, then I don't care. Like, the only thing that could possibly annoy me or hurt me or anything of that respect is some kind of actual criticism that makes sense and really gets to the heart of what I'm saying and dismantle. Yeah. If all you're saying is some baseless threat or some baseless accusation of logical inconsistency, then I honestly couldn't care less about it.
Yeah. So this is something I'm really actually interested in talking to you about. How people have changed, if at all, since you've become a very successful online skeptic who gets all these views, gets asked to give talks, who talks to well-known critical thinkers like Lawrence Krauss. So, Alex, what's it like now in terms of how friends and family speak to you or treat you?
Well, it's interesting because it's all online. It's a different world. So it actually hasn't really had much of an effect at all in my, so to speak, real life. Because of the fact that it is all numbers on a screen. Now, it's only every so often that it will kind of seep into the real world. And when that happens, because it happens so infrequently, you know, I still have the same friends and I still meet up with them the same amount, and we talk about the same things as we did 3-4 years ago. You know, there's no difference there. But sometimes there are small differences, like the fact that they have like part-time jobs that I don't, because this is my job, and obviously I'm still working, as you know, as it were. I'm still doing work, but I'm flexible about it. I can choose my own hours. I can do whatever I like. Whereas for them, they can't. They have like normal jobs, and there's a difference there, and you kind of. That's one of the things that makes you realize, oh, this is actually a real thing. I mean, he doesn't have to have a job like we do. But also, sometimes when I hit a milestone or something, like with 200,000 subscribers, you know, I'll have a friend and they'll say like, oh yeah, I saw you hit 200,000 subscribers. That's really cool. And I'll say thanks. And then we'll kind of sit there for a second and just think about it and realize how many people that actually is. And they kind of give you this look of like, that's so weird, you know, it's really bizarre. You know, if I had, if I'd sold an album as a musician that had hundreds of thousands of, or if I had like 14 million downloads on Spotify or whatever it is, you know, I don't really know what the metrics are for that, but the likelihood is that there'd be much more of an effect in my real life. You know, I'd be playing venues, and I'd be like off doing things all the time, and all of my friends would know that that was me. It would be all that they sort of talked about when they saw me, because it would be like my life that's been consumed. But with this, it's like nothing's changed, and it's only when something specific happens that gets brought up in conversation that people realize that this is something that goes on. Like when we went to, I took a friend of mine to an event in London recently with Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, and Douglas Murray, and when we walked in, you know, people were stopping me and saying that they recognized me from YouTube, and my friend just looks at me and says, "This is weird. This is bizarre." Like,
that's when the penny dropped for your friends, I think.
Yeah, it's like there are different moments when the penny drops. Like my parents don't really get the internet thing, as a lot of parents don't. I think it was when I was speaking to my dad about like the difficulties around paying taxes, for instance, as a self-employed person. And he was like, "Oh, you won't really need to worry about that until you actually have like a business, you know, that's running with this amount of success." And I kind of went, "Well, yeah, I do." And that was when the penny dropped. I'll be with a friend and I'll get recognized in the street, and that's when the penny drops. Or I'll hit a certain milestone and someone will think about it, and that's when it drops. Or they'll come across me online without searching for me. And there are different ways in which people suddenly realize that it is quite a big deal. But at the same time, it doesn't really have much of an effect in my day-to-day life at all.
Okay. Well, Alex, the world, as you probably noticed at the moment, seems to be tipping towards like irrationality, conspiracies, weird beliefs, populism, even the growth of flat earthers, as you know. So why do you think this has happened, Alex? Why, and how do you think that people like you and I and anyone who might be considering starting a YouTube channel or any other platform can help to really make a change?
Well, yeah, I think irrationality has always been there. It's just that now, in the past, although the same proportion of people will have believed that the moon landing was fake, now these people are able to actually express those views and have them broadcasted. Now,
yes.
Ultimately, this is probably a good thing, because it represents a growth in self-publication as a whole. Of course, it does come along with the fact that anybody can now speak their mind. So I don't know if it's a growth in irrationality. I just think it's more vocal now. And also, people talk about how the political sphere is more divided than ever. Like, I don't know if that's true. I really think that, I mean, can you name a time in history where there hasn't been irrationality, where there haven't been conspiratorial beliefs, where there hasn't been divisive politics? Like, it's just the nature of things. So I think that because we're living in this era, people think that we're on the brink of irrationality and fake news and all this hysteria, but in 10 years' time, people will be saying exactly the same thing.
Now that we have Instagram and YouTube channels like our own, people who believe in any kind of thing or don't believe, they have a platform. It just seems like there's more of it.
The thing is, most of the people, or at least a significant proportion of people who watch or consume this kind of conspiratorial media are doing so from a position of neutrality. They're doing it out of interest. They're doing it to keep an eye on it. They don't believe what they're hearing or watching. They just are interested to see what these people are saying, or they're watching it because they know that they'll disagree. I think that's the case with people like Alex Jones, for instance. I think a vast number of people who consume his content do so because they think it's funny, because they think it's interesting to see someone so absurd speaking their mind so freely. I don't think someone like Alex Jones being online and the ability to listen to him is any more dangerous than having certain publications or certain books written or whatever it may be. It's not really any different. The only difference is that it's slightly more accessible. Well, I mean, obviously it's more accessible in the sense that if you know what you're looking for, it's so easy to find, but it's still difficult to stumble across that stuff half the time. But like, you could just as easily say that people have been writing books for centuries that are dangerous and contain propaganda that are so easy for people to pick up and spread. Like, that's just how things are. The internet just makes it more potent. That's all it does. But the thing is, it also gives us the ability to do what we're doing. And in a world where there wasn't the same potency for irrationality and conspiracy theories, there also wouldn't have been a chance in hell that anybody would know who I am. It's only because of the growth overall that both sides of the fence have grown. So I don't think the playing field has actually shifted one way or the other, really. I think that the whole thing's just ballooned. That's all that's happened as far as I'm concerned.
So, Alex, you seem to have accomplished so much in such a short time in your channel. So the question is, what's next for you? I know you're going to concentrate on university studies, but where would you like the Cosmic Skeptic channel to go in the coming years? What do you envision for it?
It's difficult to say. I think that my ultimate aim is probably not to be a YouTuber. I see YouTube more as a medium that I'm using at the moment to get ideas across and communicate with people, but that's not the end goal. It's just a medium. I mean, so the channel itself is not something that I care about as much as the ideas and the messages. So I don't really tend to think in terms of where do I want the channel to go, because ultimately I could see myself being somebody who's a writer or who is a speaker and doesn't really upload to YouTube anymore. So it's hard to say. What I'm probably going to do is it's going to depend on education, how that goes, where/if I go to university, and well. But I think for the time being, I'm kind of just riding the tide. I'm going to keep uploading videos, and then one day I'll get an email inviting me to write an article for somebody, and then somebody will see that and invite me to take a job at some kind of publication or an online blog or something, and I'll start doing that, and then that will lead me to meet people. Like it's so hard to predict this kind of thing. You never know where this is going to end up. Like I couldn't have told you where the channel was going to be even a year ago, where it would have been today. So I really couldn't say, but the main thing is that I don't care about the channel so much as I care about the ideas. The channel could burn and die as far as I care, as long as the content that was once being produced on that channel is being produced somewhere else instead. When that disappears, that's what I would worry about. But whatever allows me to keep having conversations.
I mean, the channel is just a current conduit for your ideas and for all these different ideas. But I could easily imagine you going on the talk lecture circuit, that kind of thing, like Matt Dillahunty does, that kind of thing. And I don't know. I think I can imagine that happen quite easily, or any of those things that you mentioned.
Matt's a good example. I mean, you wouldn't call Matt a YouTuber. He does use YouTube. He uploads to YouTube quite frequently, in fact. But you wouldn't call him a YouTuber by profession. You wouldn't call him a writer because he's never written a book. I mean, he doesn't really write articles. It's kind of hard to pin down exactly what he does, but people don't recognize him for the fact that he is a successful YouTuber or a successful writer or even a successful debater. They recognize him because he is good at getting ideas across.
Yes.
That's all it is. If you think about his job description, it's discussing ideas. I mean, that's a prime example of the kind of thing I'm talking about. It doesn't really matter how you do it, as long as that job description stays the same.
Yeah, and you've always said that really what you do is you're just expressing your thoughts on things, which may be different to other people's thoughts. So would you think that's a good description of what you'd like to do, is just bringing your thoughts out into the world and seeing how people react to them?
Yeah, I'd like to be a mouthpiece for unpopular ideas, because if I have an opinion that isn't really of worth in terms of it actually making any kind of difference, then I usually won't be particularly eager to voice it. Like, I am very unhappy with the state of the Republican Party, but so is everybody. So there's not much point in me saying anything about it. I mean, what am I going to do? Make a video talking about how Donald Trump's a bad guy? Like, that's not going to do anything. That is a completely superfluous thing to be doing. I'd rather make a video when Donald Trump does something that I agree with and that I think was a good decision, that people will immediately decry because everybody hates Donald Trump, and I come out in his defense, that's something that will raise an eyebrow, and because not everybody's doing that, that's what will be worth doing. So for me, it's about defending ideas and discussing ideas, but not ones that everybody else is already discussing and defending. You know, there are people who are far better than me already defending a lot of these things. But when it becomes unpopular to defend free speech, when it becomes unpopular to defend liberal values or to criticize certain ideas or to defend certain politicians' actions or whatever, that's the kind of stuff that I'm hoping to engage with.
Okay, Alex. Well, that was really great. Thank you so much for the work that you do. I'll put links to your channel and the social media, of course, in the description below. So no doubt Cosmic Skeptic will keep on soaring, and hopefully we can catch up with you in the future for another chat.
Sure thing, of course.
Woman, take my hand, pull me out to sea, show me golden sands, leave me here to dream. Well, I've never seen the rain, no, it's never touched my skin. I imagine it's the same, the peasants or the kings. Well, I don't think I'm alive. If living should be easy, and I don't wanna die, but I can't survive another night with you. Show me something new, realize my mind, while I dream of empty days, the supermarket eyes. Well, I don't know how to swim, and I don't know how to drown. Well, it isn't much to him, but it wouldn't help me now. Well, I don't think I'm alive. If living should be easy, and I don't wanna die, but I know it would release me, so I don't think I'll survive. If daylight's so relentless, you know I don't wanna die, but it's the only place for me. So how could I resist when this world's so fit for two, and I've used my share of tricks, but I can't survive another night with you. But I can't survive another